Chapter 16 of A Strange Disappearance. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. A Strange Disappearance by Anna Catherine Green. Chapter 16. The Mark of the Red Cross. And what success did I meet? The best in the world. And by what means did I attain it? By that of the simplest, prettiest clue I ever came upon. But let me explain. When, after a wearisome day spent in an ineffectual search through the neighborhood, I went home to my room, which, as you remember, was a front one in a lodging-house on the opposite corner from Mr. Blake, I was so absorbed in mind, and perhaps I may say shaken in nerve, by the strain under which I had been laboring for some time now, that I stumbled up an extra flight of stairs, and without any suspicion of the fact, tried the door of the room directly over mine. It is a wonder to me now that I could have made the mistake, for the halls were totally dissimilar, the one above being much more cut up than the one below, besides being flanked by a greater number of doors. But the intoxication of the mind is not far removed from that of the body, and, as I say, it was not till I had tried the door and found it locked, that I became aware of the mistake I had made. With the foolish sense of shame that always overcomes us at the committal of any such trivial error, I stumbled hastily back, when my foot trod upon something that broke under my weight. I never let even small things pass without some notice. Stooping then, for what I had thus inadvertently crushed, I carried it to where a single gas jet turned down very low made a partial light in the long hall, and, examining it, found it to be a piece of red chalk. What was there in that simple fact to make me start and hastily recall one or two half-forgotten incidents which, once brought to mind, awoke a train of thought that led to the discovery and capture of these two desperate thieves? I will tell you. I don't remember now whether in my account of the visit I paid to the Schoenmaker's house in Vermont I informed you of the red cross I noticed scrawled on the panel of one of the doors. It seemed a trivial thing at the time, and made little or no impression upon me, the chances being that I should never have thought of it again, if I had not come upon the article just mentioned at a moment when my mind was full of those very Schoenmakers. But remembered now, together with another half-forgotten fact, that some days previous I had been told by the woman who kept the house I was in, that the parties over my head, 2 men and a woman, I believe she said, were giving her some trouble, but that they paid well, and therefore she did not like to turn them out. It aroused a vague suspicion in my mind, and led to my walking back to the door I had endeavored to open in my abstraction, and carefully looking at it. It was plain and white, rather ruder of make than those below, but offering no inducements for prolonged scrutiny. But not so with the one that stood at right angles to it on the left. Full in the centre of that I beheld distinctly scrawled, probably with the very piece of chalk I then held, a red cross precisely similar in outline to the one I had seen a few days before on the panel of the Schoenmaker's door at Granby. The discovery sent a thrill over me that almost raised my hair on end. Was, then, this famous trio to be found in the very house in which I had myself been living for a week or more? Over my head, in fact? I could not withdraw my gaze from the mysterious-looking object. I bent near, I listened, I heard what sounded like the suppressed snore of a powerful man, and almost had to lay hold of myself to prevent my hand from pushing open that closed door and my feet from entering. As it was, I did finger the knob a little, but an extra loud snore from within reminded me, by its suggestion of strength, that I was but a small man, and that in this case and at this hour, discretion was the better part of valor. I therefore withdrew, but for the whole night lay awake, listening to catch any sounds that might come from above, and going so far as to plan what I would do if it should be proved that I was indeed upon the trail of the men I was so anxious to encounter. With the breaking of day I was upon my feet. A rude step had gone up the stairs a few minutes before, and I was all alert to follow. But I presently considered that my wisest course would be to sound the landlady, and learn, if possible, with what sort of characters I had to deal. Routing her out of the kitchen, where at that early hour she was already engaged in domestic duties, I drew her into a retired corner and put my questions. She was not backward in replying. She had conceived an innocent liking for me in the short time I had been with her, a display of weakness for which I was myself perhaps as much to blame as she, and was only too ready to pour out her griefs into my sympathizing ear. For those men were a grief to her, acceptable as was the money they were careful to provide her with. They were not only always in the house, that is, one of them, smoking his old pipe and blackening up the walls, but they looked so shabby, and kept the girl so close, and if they did go out, came in at such unheard-of hours. It was enough to drive her crazy, yet the money. Yes, said I know, and the money ought to make you overlook all the small disagreeablenesses you mention. What is a landlady without patience? And I urged her not to turn them out. But the girl, she went on, so nice, so quiet, so sick-looking. I cannot stand it to see her cooped up in that small room, always watched over by one or both of those burly wretches. The old man says she is his daughter, and she does not deny it, but I would as soon think of that little rosy child you see cooing in the window over the way, belonging to the beggar going in at the gate, as of her with her ladylike ways having any connection with him and his rough-acting son. You ought to see her—" "That is just what I want to do," interrupted I. "Not because you have tempted my fancy by a recital of her charms," I hastened to add, "but because she is, if I don't mistake, a woman for whose discovery and rescue a large sum of money has been offered." And without further disguise I acquainted the startled woman before me with the fact that I was not, as she had always considered, the clerk out of employment whose daily business it was to sally forth in quest of a situation, but a member of the city police. She was duly impressed and easily persuaded to second all my operations as far as her poor wits would allow, giving me free range of her upper story, and above all, promising that secrecy without which all my finely laid plans for capturing the rogues without raising a scandal would fall headlong to the ground. Behold me then, by noon of that same day, domiciled in an apartment next to the one whose door bore the scarlet sign which had aroused within me such feverish hopes the night before. Clad in the seedy garments of a broken-down French artist whose acquaintance I had once made, with something of his air and general appearance, and with a few of his wretched daubs hung about on the whitewashed wall, I commenced with every prospect of success, as I thought, that quiet espionage of the hall and its inhabitants which I considered necessary to a proper attainment of the end I had in view. A racking cough was one of the peculiarities of my friend, and determined to assume the character in toto, I allowed myself to startle the silence now and then with a series of gasps and chokings that, whether agreeable or not, certainly were of a character to show that I had no desire to conceal my presence from those I had come among. Indeed, it was my desire to acquaint them as fully and as soon as possible with the fact of their having a neighbour, a weak-eyed, half-alive innocent to be sure, but yet a neighbour who would keep his door open night and day, for the warmth of the hall of course, and who, with the fretful habit of an old man who had once been a gentleman and a beau, went rambling about through the hall speaking to those he met and expecting a civil word in return. When he was not rambling or coughing he made architectural monsters out of cardboard, wherewith to tempt the pennies out of the pockets of unwary children, an employment that kept him chained to a small table in the centre of his room, directly opposite the open door. As I expected, I had scarcely given way to 3 separate fits of coughing, when the door next to me opened with a jerk, and a rough voice called out, "Who's that making all that to-do about here? If you don't stop that infernal noise in a hurry—" A soft voice interrupted him, and he drew back. "I will go see," said those gentle tones, and Luttra Blake, for I knew it was she before the skirt of her robe had advanced beyond the door, stepped out into the hall. I was yet bent over my work when she paused before me. The fact is, I did not dare look up, the moment was one of such importance to me. "You have a dreadful cough," said she, with that low ring of sympathy in her voice that goes unconsciously to the heart. "Is there no help for it?" I pushed back my work, drew my hand over my eyes (I did not need to make it tremble), and glanced up. "No," said I, with a shake of my head, "but it is not always so bad. I beg your pardon, miss, if it disturbs you." She threw back the shawl which she had held drawn tightly over her head, and advanced with an easy gliding step close to my side. "You do not disturb me, but my father is, well, a trifle cross sometimes, and if he should speak up a little harsh now and then, you must not mind. I am sorry you are so ill." What is there in some woman's look, some woman's touch, that more than all